Okay, so in the fixtures section of the listing agreement, we just pretty much incorporated the fixture definition that we have in 2104 and created language that looks very much like 2104. So all of the definitions of fixture, we don't have a separate definition section in the listing agreement, so we incorporated that definition into fixtures. We also did the same add-ins that we did before with not including curtains and the window coverings, not including the mattress on the Murphy beds, not including the TVs on the wall mounts. What's?
Our handout is not
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. Is this? Yeah, we're on 1106. Okay. So what happened here, guys, I think, is that I made changes. I added some additional slides for 1106 after I had already made the copies. Okay. That's what I'm recalling happened. Yeah. So yeah. So look up here, and we'll be hopping back into the handouts, but there's about 5 or 10 slides that are not in your handout. So I apologize for that. And we can get copies of those for you, and they will be available with a PowerPoint on the website. So in this section on fixtures, like I said, we just try to create it so it looks like 2104, incorporating those same definitions that we have for fixtures in 2104. So you guys have seen all this language before, we're just incorporating it into this one. And these are the things we talked about earlier that we incorporated in the fixture section of 2104. And all of the things that were in personal property were actually found below the exclusions in 1106. So we had personal property, exclusions, and then we had this language, right? So we moved this up to the top for personal property, but it's not new language, it was just moved to the top. A large box was inserted after the terms and conditions, and I actually think it was in the large box inserted after the terms and conditions that addresses this new clear cooperation rule, okay? Because we have kind of a challenge in handling this in the 1106 right now because, as I said, all of the brokerages have to enact this, and they all have until May 1st to do so. So throughout the state, where this form is used throughout the state, they'll be doing it at different times, right? So it's not like a date between now and then that we can say, this is the rule, because it's going to be happening at different times throughout the state, depending on when the MLSs adopt this rule. They all have to have it in place by May 1st. So we're going to have to go back and clean up this language a little bit once everybody's got this in place. And this is how we're dealing with it for just right now. So effective no later than May 1st, the MLS in which the broker is a participant will prohibit broker from conducting any public marketing of the property prior to the date the broker places a listing into the MLS. Public marketing includes but is not limited to flyers, displays in windows, yard signs, digital marketing of the property, these kind of things. Effective dates will vary between MLSs. The broker should contact the MLS in which he or she participates to determine the exact effective date of the requirement. If listing is withheld from the MLS, broker may only market the property within the broker's brokerage. The following provisions are subject to this and all other MLS rules. Okay? And actually, I think I modified the language just slightly to make it clear that it is actually one business day. So you can do marketing. Do marketing one business day prior to the time it shows up in the MLS. And there was a lot of discussion at NAR, again, about that one business day. Originally, it was a 24-hour period, and then they changed it to one business day. So you guys are the ones that are probably going to be policing this stuff and reporting this stuff, because one of the issues we talked about before is MLS compliance yesterday. How are you going to, how is MLS going to enforce this rule? And it's really going to come to their attention, I think, 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100 by some broker seeing a sign in a yard, going to the MLS, and not finding the listing, right? And then the MLS is going to get a call. You guys have to remember, it's 1 day prior, business day prior. So could it be that you take a listing on a Friday and it doesn't show up in the MLS until Monday? Yes. And is that in compliance with the rule? Yes. Okay? So don't be, first thing Monday morning on the phone with your MLS complaining about that broker. At least give it to the end of the business day, right? Or at the end of the day, 11:59 at night. If it doesn't show up in the MLS at that point, then we got a problem. Right? So the language is slightly modified from this to reflect that it's 1 business day prior. And if it's a long weekend with a holiday on a Monday, the business day is on Tuesday, guys. So the sign's out on Friday, it's not showing up until Tuesday. So we still have that issue. Okay. In paragraph 8, which is the delayed entry into the MLS listing service, which we have always had, we do have in the part where it says broker shall not market the property through the MLS, We say if the listing is withheld from the MLS, broker may only market the property within the broker's brokerage, okay? So that's the new rule. That's the way. If you guys are keeping it out of the MLS altogether, it can only be marketed through the broker's brokerage. And the broker, and then the second B, brokers shall begin marketing the property in the house within 48 hours of. So we still have that option. You know, this was a long conversation I had with some of the MLSs, the AEs from the MLSs on earlier in the week. I don't remember what day it was. It's all been a blur, but you know, talking about you know, how the coming soon works with that, guys. And I think what we're going to see is there's only a couple of MLSs in the state, I think, that have a coming soon requirement where you have to put it in the list in the MLS if it's a coming soon. I think we're going to see all of the MLSs having that same kind of requirement because you can't put a sign in the yard. You can, but only one business day before. It's in the MLS. The MLS, it does not have to be syndicated, right? So you can opt not to be sending it out to all the public-facing websites, but it has to be available for all the MLS participants, right? So maybe if your buyer isn't or your seller's not quite ready to have it out there on Zillow and everywhere else, but they do want a sign in the front yard, then you're going to have to put it in the MLS within one business day of that sign going in the front yard. And how, you know, you're going to have to opt to keeping it from being sent out to all of these different websites, right? And so coming along the coming soon listing, you know, a kind of procedures that some of these MLSs have already adopted will allow that to happen. So it'll go in the MLS and kind of a coming soon. It will be shared with all of the MLS participants, but it's not being forced out to other, you know, to Zillow and Realtor.com and all these other public-facing websites quite yet. But it meets the requirement, which will allow you to put the sign in the yard. Okay, so does that make sense? So you can still do that. And the days on market thing was also a big conversation about how calculating days on market. The conversations I've had with some of the MLS people, I'm encouraging them because before when you said days on market, you really were not necessarily when it shows up in the MLS were you talking about first day on market because there could have been signs in the front yard for weeks. And it could have been pushed out on social media and it could have been advertised in all sorts of other forums, right, before it went live. So the idea was that, hey, if you're going to be able to do all that in this coming soon status or whatever, however you guys were doing it, before it went live in the MLS, then by saying that day one, when you put it in MLS as your days on market is 1, was kind of misleading, maybe, right? Because it really has been on the market for weeks now as you've been putting your signs out, your social media posts, and all these other things. However, that's not going to be the case anymore, right? You're not going to be able to do all those things, but one day before it goes in the MLS. So now the date it goes in the MLS will be more accurate as far as if you calculate days on market based on the day it goes in the MLS. And the importance of that as I was explaining, excuse me, from the, is that, you know, if you're sitting across the table from your seller, and I'm always telling you guys this, if you're sitting there at the table and they're saying, I'm going to Europe for a couple of weeks and I don't really want to market the property until I get back. If the MLS calculates days on market based on the date you take that listing agreement, then you're doing them a great disadvantage, right, by signing that listing agreement in that moment. Because it means when you go live in the MLS, you're going to be 14 days on market, 21 days on market, right out the gate, right? And so really, you really have to tell them that, right? You have to tell them that. You have to tell them, I would love to take your listing, I really would, but my MLS is going to start counting our days on market today, even though I can't do no public marketing of the property for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And so maybe we need to have another conversation when we get back from Europe. Maybe we have to have another conversation when we finish the kitchen remodel, right? Because I don't want to disadvantage you in the MLS like that, right? But I tell you guys, get them to sign when you're sitting at the kitchen table, right? Don't let them go off to Europe without a signed agreement and just wait to do marketing until down the line. But that's why I'm encouraging MLSs to really look at that. Because now we know there's not going to be a bunch of public marketing done before they go live in the MLS. Maybe a day, right? Because it's one business day. Maybe if you got a long weekend, 2 or 3 days, right? But we're not talking weeks and weeks of it because it's not allowed under the rule anymore. So we now have kind of a more accurate account of when it actually was being published to the market, right? Does that all make sense? Yeah. So I'm asking your MLSs to look at that because I want you guys to get those listing agreements signed when you're sitting at the table and not disadvantage the seller by having those days on market show up at 14, 21 days when you finally get it in there because they don't want it marketed for 14, 21 days or whatever. Okay. So we still have that option. Paragraph 16, language added creating an affirmative duty for sellers to respond to offers. Now this is interesting because as you guys know, MLS rules and code of ethics rules that passed last year, or maybe it was the year before last, I'm trying to think now. Again, I lose all track of time. Require you, as the listing broker, to put in writing, upon request by the buyer broker, that you submitted the offer to the seller. Now, who can make the seller respond to an offer? Nobody. Not anybody, right? Nobody. So you can ask them to do so, and if they say no, all you have to do is respond as a realtor member, that yes, I submitted your offer, and you get that in writing from the listing broker that was submitted. But sometimes, they would like to see something more than that. They would like to see the rejected box marked on the purchase agreement. When somebody brought up putting this in there, I told them it's got no teeth. Because who's the agreement between? The listing agreement. The broker and the seller. How many listing brokers are going to sue their seller for breach of contract for failing to provide a written rejection of the offer? Zero. Nobody's going to do that. I don't recommend you do that. Okay? By no means do I recommend you bring suit against your seller for not responding in writing to an offer. All right? So I put it in there. Well, we just think, they have to think like 3 or 4 steps down the line. Like, so what if I don't? What's going to happen? Kind of thing. We're hoping to just having it in there creates that affirmative obligation that's enough to maybe get it to happen more than once, right? I mean, every once in a while, they're, oh, well, it's in the contract, I gotta do it, right? That was kind of the idea. And it does no teeth. That's the reality of the situation, but you don't need to tell them that, right? You can let them think you're gonna sue their pants off of them for not responding to an offer. So we'll see if it helps get some of those sellers to respond to offers, right? That's the hope of it. I've been in paragraph 6D, language added, creating a duty for sellers to respond. Well, like I talked about, it's unlikely it's ever going to be enforced. We have this section, of course, in our perfect world, the sellers are checking the rejects the offer box on our last page of our purchase agreement and sending it back over. And this was what the last page is going to look like, guys. We are getting rid of some of the, like I said, the address and phone numbers and things like that for the buyer and seller, and adding that additional line. But we've kind of condensed, kind of squished this a little bit together and cleared out some white space to make it smaller. Paragraph 6I, we had this in there already, but I've kind of called it out. It was buried in another paragraph. It's in the affirmative obligation paragraph for sellers to secure all their pets, their valuables, and their medication accordingly when the property is made available for showings. Broker does not guarantee the security of any of the foregoing against acts of third parties. And we reference the release of liability paragraph, paragraph 15, which in the event that something goes missing and they think you're responsible for it, paragraph 15 talks about how you're not responsible for it unless you did something negligently, right? You had an open house and you walked out the door and you left the door open and then somebody came in and robbed them blind. I'm afraid I can't protect you there, guys, right? No language I can create is going to save you in that scenario, all right? So if you didn't do anything negligent though, then you're not going to be responsible for things getting missed. And again, this language is there to protect you guys in the event that something does go missing and they blame you. Paragraph 8D2, seller authorizations, open houses by other brokers. Okay, and we did make one little small change, and this was in section 2. Barbara, can you make a note of this, or Bev, or somebody, that we did put qualifying brokers in here, remember? Can somebody remind me of that? So, as you guys know, if you are an associate broker working from 2 different offices, you cannot hold an open house for your friend at the other brokerage, okay? ABs can only be affiliated with one QB, right? And there was an exception to that made last January that said that you can do work for other QBs under the same roof if your QB has authorized you to do so in the independent contractor agreement, all right? So there's a bunch of QBs in your office, and you work for this QB, but you want to do some work for this QB, it's all under the same umbrella. Your QB and you can have something in your independent contractor agreement that says I can do work for other QBs in the office, all right? But you cannot do work for brokerage people outside your brokerage. So when your friend asks you to hold an open house for them and they work for a different brokerage, can't happen if you're an associate broker, okay? Can't happen. If you're a qualifying broker, it can happen, okay? But here's the deal, guys, and this is true even if you're getting some AB in your office to do an open house for you. Your seller's used to dealing with you, right? Your seller is used to dealing with you, right? So if one day they show up to their open house. They were gonna go away to the park for the day, but it's raining, so they come home early, and they see this broker in your house, and they have no idea who this broker is, who's holding the open house, right? Whether it be a QB from another office, or be an associate broker from your own office, you guys, I think you need to tell your seller that you're having somebody else do that, and get their authorization to do that, because maybe they don't feel comfortable with that. Even if it's the same brokerage, they just want you. They love you, and they just want you, right? So this is where you can get them to authorize, a broker to authorize other brokers within the broker's brokerage to do it. So you could hire another QB if that's okay with them, they're authorizing you to do that. Or outside the broker's brokerage to hold an open house. And we have had added qualified broker to that, because again, those are the only people that can do it outside the brokerage is another QB, not another AD. So we've added that, that came out of the Forms Committee meeting on Tuesday. Okay, and you can check all that apply, and you can get your seller to sign off on it. The other thing that we're creating, it's not out yet, but we're trying to get it out quickly, maybe at the next Forms Committee meeting, and you can create your own now, is advertisement to the public. And it's more important, not so much in the sense where the associate broker in the office, in your same office is doing it, because you've got your, your sign out front, your Sotheby's sign, your KW sign, your whatever company you're with. And when that consumer buyer, potential buyer, walks through those doors and sees you there, they assume that you work for that brokerage on that sign out there in the front yard, right? So if it's not that big a deal in the event that you're hiring or getting another AB within your same office to do it, but if you're hiring a QB from a whole other brokerage, right? So this QB does not work for that brokerage in the front yard, there should be some notification to the consumer that that's the case, right? So right now you can create your own flyer that says, that you can be handing out or put somewhere, obvious in the place, the open house. This open house is being held open by, John Doe from ABC Brokerage, which is different than the sign in the front yard. And just notify them of the fact. So we're going to create some kind of form, and you guys can create your own form. It's not in a complicated form. That really is what it would say, is that this brokerage, this open house is being held open by, John Doe from ABC Brokerage, so that they know that the broker they're dealing with does not work for the company that's on the side of the front yard. Paragraph 8E, reporting false information. We already have this language if the seller believes information is false. And we added the same kind of information we have in the buyer-broker agreement about just notifying the sellers that there is public-facing websites that have inaccurate information on it, right? We're just telling them that is the case. And that you have, again, kind of emphasizing, because we have this language in there sort of already, that broker has limited and in some cases no ability to remove false information from non-MLS participants' websites. Okay, so we're just bringing that home. In the definition of sale, we just simply move this from the beginning of the contract to paragraph 11, which is the compensation for sale paragraph, but the language hasn't changed. Also in paragraph 11, compensation and other events. So we have a whole provision, as you guys know, and it only works for you. Out, so that you got to fill it out. We have a provision for compensation in the event of sale, and then we have compensation in the event of other events, right? You bring them a buyer, ready, willing, and able, paying full price, cash, no contingencies, and your seller says, I'm not going to sell. You guys get compensated if you filled out subsection B of that paragraph. If you didn't, I can't help you. Again, I can only do so much. There's all sorts of things in there. For example, they go under contract and the seller breaches the contract. You get paid. Now, why do we have it broken out into two separate sections? Because it may be a different amount, guys. If there's no sale, then you don't have to pay a co-op broker commission. There's no sale, you don't have to pay co-op. So if you are going to be marketing in the MLS, you may want to create a compensation arrangement that allows you to share and still get what you feel is fair to everybody, right? If you have to collect from the seller when there's no sale, one of these other events in their subsection B, you may reduce that commission because you don't have to share it in that scenario. It doesn't mean you can't. You can share it, but you don't have to share it. So that's why we have it broken out into two separate things. So what we want to be clear about in this section is that these are basically liquidated damages clause, guys. So in the event that there is a breach of the contract, in the event that they're not willing to sell to a buyer, in the event they determine that they make their property unmarketable so you can't sell it, in the event that they decide that they don't want to sell the property anymore, any of those things should happen, they're gonna argue, there was no guarantee you were gonna get that property sold in the first place, right? I mean, let's say that they decide to make their property unmarketable, or they decide they don't want it on the market anymore, right? And they say, there's no guarantee you would have earned your commission, there's no guarantee that you would have gotten this property sold. So it makes damages a little bit difficult perhaps to ascertain. A little bit easier if you have a breach of contract, right? Because then you can say, hey, if we got to closing, I would have gotten my commission based on that contract. If you bring a ready, willing, and able buyer, for this contract amount, that's a little bit easier. But some of those scenarios in that list are a little bit hard to figure out, and they're always going to argue, there's no guarantee you're going to get my property sold to begin with, right? So we've created, basically, made it clear that this is a liquidated damages clause, and that's what liquidated damages are, guys. It's an amount that the parties agree to in advance that any of these things occur, we agree this is going to compensate you for this event, right? Because we recognize that maybe in some of these situations, actual damages are going to be a little bit hard to ascertain, right? So we're agreeing in advance that this is what our damages are going to be. So that's what this paragraph has been cleaned up to really say, and hopefully give you guys some more teeth when you have people that want to just unilaterally terminate the contract. Now, I did talk at one of my earlier updates about one of a surefire ways to get your seller or buyer to bring a complaint against you is to sue them. That's the reality. You want them to start putting you under a microscope, bring a lawsuit against them for your commission, and all of a sudden you will find that they will usually retaliate with some kind of code of ethics violation or real estate commission complaint or something like that. So I do warn you about that. Don't say you weren't warned. But at the same time, these are contracts, right? And they are supposed to mean something. And so we just try to give them some more teeth. Paragraph 16, finance or cash purchase. This is the same information we put in 2104. You guys aren't responsible for the veracity, authenticity, et cetera, of these proof of fund letters or pre-qual letters. Hey, quick show of hands. In our purchase agreement, because this just came up the other day, we have pre-qualification requirements. And this came about years ago because buyers were providing some really weird looking pre-qual letters that really didn't give the seller any sense of security that they were going to make it to closing. And so we actually put in our purchase agreement that these are the elements that a pre-qual letter must have. And we had some feedback at the time we did this. This was years ago. Some feedback at the time we did that said, most pre-qual letters don't have these elements in it. And the response I got from the form committee members at the time were, but they could, right? I mean, I'm not the one who created any of that. I mean, this was the brokers. This was totally driven by the brokers because it wasn't necessarily a legal issue. And the response was, it might, if you don't tell the lender this is what you need in it, then maybe it doesn't have all these elements. But you can tell them, hey, this is what I need in it, and you can get this pre-qual letter, okay? I'm being told that that's not the case. That number one, the pre-qual letters do not have those elements. And number two, you can't get them even if you ask them. So we are taking this issue back to the Forms Committee, but how many of you who have actually paid any attention to those requirements feel like you can get a letter that meet those requirements? Yeah. It's hard. A few of you think you can. A lot of their policies, no. So the thing we're considering at the Forms Committee is whether or not to, change those up a bit to allow a little more flexibility. Because we just had the other day a situation, of course, where the letter did not meet those 4 requirements. It was a pre-qual letter, supposedly, it was a pre-qual letter, but it didn't meet those requirements, and the seller used that to say, you've breached the contract, I'm taking this better contract that's on the table. Right?
You could make that pre-qual letter stronger.
That isn't true. The comment was you could come back, you could kind of loosen it up in the purchase agreement, and then the listing broker could counter with more specific terms, and that would really bring it home, right? I mean, if you're going to make a counter and say, hey, I want these 4 things, then that makes it very clear that those are very important things, right? So that's an option. That's a good idea. So I was just trying to get a kind of a feel for whether or not you think you can get these. You're getting these pre-qual letters, the ones that you want. But anyway, that's going to be on the conversation for conversation. So. Paragraph 18, the inspection reports. We're going to explain to them the way the inspection process works a little bit before we get to 2104. We're gonna do it at the time they take the listing. So when you're having that substantive conversation I was talking about, you need to be having about, you really don't want the report maybe, or, you know, we've got these copyright issues we have to deal with, and if we can't provide the whole report to the next buyer, we gotta transfer all that information to the property disclosure statement, all of those conversations. Let's not wait till we get to 2104 to deal with those. Let's talk about them at the listing stage, okay? So that provision has been added. 4550, our PID disclosure form, has been removed from the library. Most of our PIDs are in the Albuquerque area. We do have one up in Farmington now. I think we might have one down in Cruces. We have one up in Angel Fire. This form has been removed because the form that the PIDs are filing of record is everything that 4550 had plus a signature place for the buyers to sign and acknowledge receipt. And that's all explained on the PID page of GAR. And we probably need to do something like that at the state level for some of these outlying PIDs as well. But go to that PID page if you're in the GAR area. We do have a new lead-based paint brochure. It's that's out, and that is going to be released with these other forms. It's not really all that different, guys. It's just a little prettier, a little more updated, you know, that kind of thing. So it's going to be out there in the library. Yeah. So our work plan for this upcoming year. These are some of the things that we're working on. A vacant land and improvements property disclosure statement, a one-time listing agreement, which we get asked for quite frequently. A seller disclosure for condos, because they're certainly a little bit different than our residential single families. A supplement to the seller disclosure statement, so when you have a copyright issue where you can't share that report with the next buyer, you can update your property disclosure statement opposed to going back into that very long document. That, by the way, is also being reconsidered yet again at the Forms Committee. They're going to be reviewing that document again. But this is a supplement to that, so you don't have to go back in to update it. The seller paying a buyer's broker a bonus. So if you see a seller offering a bonus in the MLS, you guys, remember what I said about you want your seller paying anybody anything, there's got to be something in writing signed. So you can't go to that listing broker and say, you owe me that money. It said in the listing, in the MLS listing, the seller is willing to pay that buyer's broker who brings them a full price offer or an offer in the next 10 days or whatever the stipulation is. You need the seller to be signing something that says, yeah, I'm going to pay you that buyer broker. And if you are representing the buyer, you should have your buyer, you know, acknowledging that. We'll deal with that in the form. A bill of sale for personal property that's being sold outside the contract. Release of home inspector copyright. So in the event that you can't, your inspector has that language in there, but is allowing you to share that copyright, that inspection report. A poly-tech information sheet. And we talked about this at the Form Committee meeting the other day, and this really, I've worked on 3 information sheets this year, but this one was voted of top priority, so I'm going to try to get that back to them in March. So that's going to be done by mid-year, I promise, a poly-tech information sheet. And the information sheet, guys, are there for, somebody told me yesterday, I won't mention any names, Gene, that we have too many forms in our library, and I said, there's no such thing as too many forms. You guys you use them if you want to use them, right? You know, I was explaining yesterday, and I have to mention it again today. I was on the phone with the guy who runs the D board. D board is the disciplinary board for attorneys here in New Mexico, and they usually get involved when their attorneys who have lost their licenses like to pretend like they did it. And continue to practice like their attorneys. Yeah, and there are a few of them here in the state, and so I usually get a call on that because for some reason they gravitate toward real estate when they lose their law license. I don't understand that, but that's what ends up happening. And then they keep trying to act like an attorney. So I get calls from him. He and I are on a first name basis, really nice guy. His last name is Sleeve, but it has nothing to do with what he does for a living. He's a really nice guy. So he goes after just barred attorneys and people that are practicing law without a license. But we were having a conversation and you guys came up because I'm, you know, counsel for you guys. And so we had a conversation about that. And, you know, I've told you all the stuff about what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. But as I said yesterday in my meeting, what the law says is you can fill in blanks on a contract. You can't create your own language, guys. And so, you know, that was a conversation I was having with him. And, you know, I tell him that you guys know exactly what you're not allowed to do and you never cross the line. Between us, and I'm glad he's not here, you cross the line all the time. And you probably nobody in this room. But you should see some of the stuff I get. I mean, just yesterday after a meeting, somebody brought me up an ORW they got. You should have seen the language in that. And they said, was this written by an attorney? And, you know, you could tell it was written by somebody who, you know, maybe wish they'd gone to law school, right? So it was like, oh man, it was such a mess. But we create the forms so you don't have to create the forms, right? Because you guys are really limited in what you can do in that regard. And the information sheets are there to protect you guys and protect your clients. So you know, I mean, I'm just never gonna buy into there's too many forms. But I will say we are looking at the whole forms library, and things that we are not using on any kind of basis are being pulled, so that's one news. So that's our plan for the next year. If you have an